So clearly we talked a lot today in the speech about the various improvements we made during the legislative session this year. Talked a lot about fiscal responsibility, particularly the fact that we got a budget done this year on time for the first time in 10 years. We were able to put money away in the rainy day fund. We said no to more borrowing, which is something that I promised to do at the Neshoba County Fair last year, and although there's been an awful lot of people complaining about it, it was the right thing to do. It doesn't make sense for us to saddle our children and grandchildren with more debt. So we're proud of the success we made. We spent a lot of time this year on education reform. We did a lot of good things. The state Senate passed a lot of bills. The House didn't pass, and so we'll come back next year with things like public charter schools, things like appointed superintendents, which I think are very important. But we were able to do some things like, even though we cut taxes on businesses, even though you saw us really work hard on cutting expenditures in state government, we also invested $30 million more in the K-12 public education because our priority is in fact public education. As we look to the future, it's clear that our number one priority must be job creation, bringing better and higher paid jobs to Mississippi. But intrinsic within our job creation efforts, we must improve the education attainment level of our citizens. But to do that, we've got to have education reform. One of the things I said today is for those members of both parties who are scared of education reform in our state, they need to buckle their seatbelts because reform is coming to Mississippi. Just like public charter schools are in Memphis, they're in Arkansas, they're in Louisiana. There's an opportunity for kids who are trapped in failing public schools to have an opportunity for success through charter schools, and we'll keep pushing for that. But that's not a panacea. We've got to continue to raise the level of expectations for administrators, for teachers, for parents, and most importantly, we have to continue to raise expectations for our students. Because I'm convinced that if we raise the bar, we raise the level of expectations, our kids will stand up and they'll meet those expectations. So, we spent a lot of time talking about that today, and I think it went really well.
What do you think your education reform efforts will mean for counties like Neshoba County and others in East Mississippi? How do you see the impact here on the ground?
Well, I mean, you look at a county like Neshoba County, but really Neshoba's no different than any other county in our state, isn't it? We've got a lot of kids that are doing well. We've got a lot of parents that are doing well. We've got a lot of teachers and a lot of administrators that are doing well. But we've got to continue to raise that level of expectations. And that's something that we're committed to do. There's really a myriad of things that we must complete. One is we've got to continue to invest in our schools. This year, for the first time in 5 years, we actually saw a year-over-year increase in funding for public schools, and that's an important piece. But you know, there are those who think that's the only important piece, and they're just not correct in those beliefs. So, as we raise the level of expectations, as we changed our new rating system, because our old rating system, while well-intentioned, I'm sure, really didn't accurately reflect what the school district and the actual schools were doing. So in the old rating system, in which a school may have been rated successful, we had almost 50 school districts rated successful in the old system. And what we found was that in those 14 of those school districts had a majority of their schools rated below successful or worse. And in 2 school districts across Mississippi, they were rated successful. They had no schools that were rated successful or better. That doesn't make any sense to me, and I don't think it makes any sense to parents across Mississippi. And so by changing the rating system to an A, B, C, D, or F, what you'll find is parents and students understand what we expect from an A, and I also think they also understand that C simply isn't good enough. And so I think that in and of itself will make a big difference. The fact is that in Florida, in 1999, when they implemented this new rating system, by the way, this is the law. It goes into effect July 1. We'll have new ratings in September. What you'll find is in Florida, when they first did this in 1999, they had 500 schools rated A or B. In the most recent rating system last year, they had 2,300 schools rating in those highest 2 categories. That's a huge, dramatic impact that we hope to see in Mississippi, so that we see an increase in student achievement. Because while the education establishment, the status quo, wants to talk about the inputs, how much money, et cetera, what I want to talk about is what is the output. students, what are the achievement levels, I think that this will be a major difference.
How important is early childhood education in the formula?
Early childhood is an important piece of the puzzle. It is just another one of many pieces of the puzzle. We see in our state an awful lot of positive progress being made as it relates to early childhood. And clearly, you've got a lot of federal money in many of our districts that are educating children at the early childhood level. You've got the Mississippi Building Blocks program. You've got the Excel by 5 program. We've got a lot of private sector money coming in. We've got to continue to look at options for early childhood education. But the reality is, many in the education community use that as a crutch. We don't need to use anything as a crutch anymore. We need to say, yeah, everything that we have now is not perfect, but we've got to see improvement in our student outcome, improvement in education attainment level by our citizens, because that's what our business community requires as we try to create more jobs.
What about on the other side? Governor Bryan kind of rolled out his thoughts about a pay-for-performance plan for teachers instead of tenure. Where do you stand on that? How do you feel like that? Do you feel like that could be one of the answers to improvement?
Well, I think generally speaking, it's a good idea. It's something that I will support. Like any proposal, the devil is in the details, and I have not had the opportunity to read the report yet and get into the details of what exactly Governor Bryan is proposing. But I think Governor Bryan, Speaker Gunn, and I all agree that we've got to raise the level of expectations of our teachers, of our administrators, as well as of our parents and our students. And so clearly that is one option that we need to look at. It's like charter schools. It's not a panacea, but it's a good option in a way in which to improve things. We shouldn't give anybody a raise in state government just for showing up every day. We ought to give raises because things are actually happening and progress is being made.
Forgive me if you've already covered this, but where do you stand on the charter school debate? That was one of the big topics of this session, and where do you see that going forward?
Well, public charter schools are a very important piece of the overall pie. In the state senate this year, we passed it twice. We passed a good charter school bill. We passed it, by the way, with bipartisan support. Republicans and Democrats voted for public charter schools in the state. And if you look at the national movement, there are 41 states today that have public charter schools. There are those who would like to pass just any